Everybody's in. Hello. Oh, this makes me so happy. Welcome, Dr. Candace. Hello, Maddie. Hello,
Hello.
Gia. How are you ladies doing today?
Great. So great. Thank you for having me. I can't wait.
I
Gonna be
love
fun.
it. So, for those of us who are just joining us, this is what we're going to do today. It's kind of fun. So, as Crystal was just mentioning, Maddie Gia and I run a podcast called Work It Life, and we air it about once a week, once every couple weeks, depending on the season. And we are so lucky to have incredible guests like Dr. Candace Steele Flippin. So, what we're going to do today is now I don't, the numbers are escaping me, but today there are definitely a lot of podcasts out there and a lot of listeners. And for those who don't run a podcast but listen to them, might be curious around, well, what happens behind the scenes? How does this actually happen? And so, what we wanted to do for X Day today is show you a little bit behind the curtain. So, we're going to do a little bit of the intros here. And again, like, how do we set things up? What happens behind the scenes? And then what we're going to do is we're going to kick off a live recording. And with that, you're going to see like this reset, intro music. Maddie's going to introduce who we are. I'll introduce Dr. Candace, and that's going to be actually what will be on the podcast episode when it's aired later today. And then if you're curious about the after, we're going to end the episode and we'll have a little bit of chit chat between all of us. It'll give you an opportunity. So I have Maddie and I have a lot of questions for Dr. Candace. We were joking
Ready.
that 30 minutes might be a tight one. So we'll squeeze in as many as we can. But obviously, for anybody who is listening who didn't have a chance to, prepare questions with us, please stay on and we can do some live Q&A. And then we'll wrap things up and say our goodbyes. But this is like a little bit of the dynamic intro and then back. So I'll just go through real quick. The one person who I actually want to introduce first that does all this magic behind the scenes, but you haven't seen her face as much, is Gia Santana. So Crystal just mentioned her. There she is. And if you wonder how much goes behind like producing a podcast, it's a lot. it's a lot more than I expected. And yeah, probably even Maddie. So when you think about this, like building the house and having these like beautiful windows and conversations, like Gay is like our foundation, our everything, our megaphone to the world. And so oftentimes she is in these kinds of sessions, she's behind the scenes and people don't get to see her. She gets us ready, cues us up, finishes off the episode, does any editing if she needs to, publishes it, does a
Posts on
description, like
social media.
yes, everything, social media posts. And it's I think sometimes when there's a large volume of this knowledge sharing, people don't realize how much work there is behind it. So we thought this is actually a great opportunity to showcase a little bit around it and showcase Guille because again, usually she's like the magician in the back who helps us with all the ins and outs and actually makes this possible, because I think between Maddie and I, if we were just on our own, there's no way. And then Maddie has just been a wonderful co-host over the last, goodness, almost a year and a half. Yesterday her Gia and I were talking about next episodes and the different topics, and we were thinking about like the number of different sessions we had, and it's been really incredible. And Maddie will introduce herself a little bit more in the actual podcast, but she's a culture designer. She has a tremendous amount of experience in helping companies build better cultures. Maddie, you've written 3 books. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes.
Like Dr. Candace, like I can't.
Vanya, we need to get you to write a book.
Yeah.
I would love to. I'm having
Don't
flashbacks
panic.
to my dissertation, and that, oh my goodness, like that. I
You
wish
can do
I have
it.
coffee and water here. I don't have whiskey. Oh my gosh, but maybe Maddie, we'll see. And then Dr. Candace will introduce you obviously more formally in the podcast, and I have your bio here, but we were recently introduced by a mutual friend, and from the first time that I spoke with you, I was just in awe.
Oh, thank
And
you.
I read your book and we had a couple of conversations, and I just thought, this is somebody that, if we can contribute to giving people more exposure to you and who you are and what you
Thank
stand
you.
for, like, it would be such an honor. So I'm getting a little emotional.
Oh, thank you.
But I think that what you're doing and the things and the issues you're bringing up to light in the device, and I think we'll talk all about your book in our episode. But I read it on a flight, and I usually nap on flights, and this was like something like I couldn't let it down. It was so good, and I took so many notes, and that's why we're going to, for everyone who's attending our session, we're going to, give away a copy of your book for anybody who's in North America. It'll be a physical signed copy. For all of you, incredible listeners joining us from other places, we'll send you an ebook, where it's challenging to get hard copies. But we just felt so passionately about getting your knowledge and your advice and your very practical advice and very real. Like, I felt like I was talking with you when I was reading that
Oh,
book.
thank
And I get goosebumps even just saying it. And I had the pleasure of speaking with you. I think it was only maybe once or twice over a Zoom call before, and I could hear your voice and I could hear your heart and soul in it,
oh, thank
and all the passion and the challenges and the desire to make a difference. And so this just seemed like a really, really perfect platform to bring that back to life, not back, but like bring it to life for those individuals who might not know you yet before you become super duper famous, which I know you will. But just such a pleasure to have you, and thank you so much for your time here today.
I was saying it's my pleasure. Thank you so much. I can't wait.
Oh, well, lovely. So what I'm going to do, real quick, unless Guy, Maddie, is there anything either one of you want to add before what I'm going to do, which is like real life stuff, is hook up my microphone. And Maddie and Guy have seen, so because this is a part of a larger event that we're doing today, I have a challenge because it's like this little thing, having it in front of me because I'm constantly with water, different things, and I'm like, I'm gonna knock it over, the computer's gonna go. But for the quality of the sound of the
Oh, great.
podcast, and Maddie's laughing because she knows it's true. Like, this would be like me chasing things all around. I'm going to hook it up now and we'll do a sound check because it doesn't always work. Sometimes I'm
No
still in
worries.
AirPods, sometimes it's all over the place. I've actually turned off my phone, so hopefully the Bluetooth doesn't connect there.
Oh, it's okay.
But let's see. Let's see.
Technology.
Yes. All right.
It's funny though,
And I
because even
love
if you're all set up for a podcast, you always want to check just beforehand. And,
Oh, absolutely.
again. And then things can always also happen, internet cuts out, whatever. So we're just
Yeah.
always prepared or just rolling with it.
Oh my goodness. Well, can you hear me?
Yep.
Is
Yes.
it working? Yes. Okay. Because in our so I was joking with the team earlier. So this morning before we're getting started for our internal team, I sent everybody a note and I said, listen, maybe you all know this, but I just read somewhere like turn off, restart your computer before we go live, restart your internet router. I recently got new internet because like my other one was really spotty and it was really not, fun for these kinds of events. And so I was ready to go. And in our last session, I was charging my AirPods because I thought, we have a couple hours of content today. I don't want them to go without battery. And I put them back in and it was doing this horrible feedback. And I was like, oh, you got to be kidding. Like, I've never had this before. I'm like, is it my, so I was turning off like my phone. I was resetting. But a part of it is just like, well, we'll talk about, Candace. It's like resilience, like,
Right.
it'll be okay.
It'll be
I mean, I
okay.
wish I wasn't doing it in front of potentially hundreds of people, but I will find a way to
It's
make
fine.
sure that this works. All right. So with my microphone, does anybody need to do any preparing before we start to record live?
Nope. My
Nope.
devices are off.
Thank
Good to
you.
go.
Yes. Yes, I even asked our nanny to please have my often rowdy 3.5-year-old in another part of the apartment, or else he would definitely make the podcast. Like, he loves to be heard. All right, everybody. So what's going to happen is we are going to do a countdown, and then we're going to kick off the show as we're going to be recording the podcast. So this podcast is what's going to be made live to the world for downloads. Maddie will introduce the show. I will introduce Dr. Candace, and then we'll start a conversation that's focused on her new book. When we're done, we'll wrap it up, and then we'll stay here. We'll come back just for any questions, comments from anybody that's joined us.
Great.
All right, Gia, do your magic.
Hey. Let's go.
Let's go.
All right. Hello. Welcome, new listeners, or welcome back, regular fans. And today, welcome to the XDay audience. We're doing a special live taping of this show today. So welcome to Work at Life. I'm Maddie Grant. I'm a culture consultant at Propel, and I'm here with my beautiful co-star, Sonia Lucina, president of the Workforce Division at Question Pro, who is also an organizational psychologist. So just so you know, Work at Life is a show for everyone, whether you're an employee or an employer, who believes that work should be just as fulfilling as life outside of work. This means that we explore a ton of burning topics related to creating more human workplaces. And what's different about our show is that we look at these burning issues through the lens of both the individual and the organization. And of course, we always want you to leave every episode with at least one practical idea to take back with you. And today, I know that you will have many practical ideas because we have a super special guest. So I'm going to let Sonia take it from here to kick us off and introduce our guest.
Thank you, Maddie, and welcome Dr. Candace Steele-Flippin to the Work and Life podcast. It's so lovely to have you on.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you, Maddie. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, Sonia, depending on where you're watching from.
Yes, thank you. And so today is a special episode. We're lucky that we have a lot of different really brilliant guests. Today's episode is actually going to center around Dr. Candace's new book. So we have a lot of particular questions around, what inspired her to write it, the different takeaways, and we're just so excited because it's a topic about really building your career path, particularly as a woman, and something that Maddie and I had a whole season in our podcast about the first female recession last year when women were hit particularly hard. So this is certainly a topic that's near and dear to our hearts. And Dr. Candace, we got lots of questions for you, but before we jump into those, you just have such an incredible background and such incredible experience. So before we go into the questions, I'd like to a little more formally introduce you and share your bio with everybody, just so they know, as they're hearing our discussion, have a little bit of a glimpse around where that passion comes from, where that expertise comes from. So without further ado, Dr. Candace Steele-Flippin is a Senior Vice President and Chief Communications Officer at Acuity Brands, a leading industrial technology company based in Atlanta, Georgia. Since 2016, Dr. Steele-Flippin has been a research fellow at the Weatherhead School of Management at Case Western Reserve University. She has authored 3 books, Generation Z in the Workplace, Millennials in the Workplace, and the one we will be discussing today, Get Your Career in Shape. Dr. Steele-Flippin was named in 2020 as one of the most influential Black executives in corporate America by Savoy magazine, and has received over 20 communications and public relation awards throughout her career. She has been featured on Forbes, CNBC, CBS, NBC, and Today.com. Well, Dr. Candace, I don't even know what to say.
Thank you.
I am humbled by having you here. And, I read your book just recently after we had met, And I'm a big reader. Like, I'm a researcher, I'm an academic, and I just thought, wow, like it was such an incredible balance between research and facts, but also communicated in such a human way that I really felt that as I was reading it, that somehow you knew me and you knew me forever. And that I just, I thought, wow, like I was taking notes and I was highlighting different things, and I just thought this is a brilliant set of advice, but also communicated in such a way that felt really approachable, that didn't feel
Mhm.
intimidating, but made me excited to say, "Ah, okay, like I realize now the areas that I'm strong in, and I realize the areas that I really need to address." And so, as I mentioned, this wasn't your first book. Like, what inspired you to write about this topic today?
You know, I don't know how many folks who are listening are women or have women in their lives, but throughout my career, I've had so many conversations with women who wanted more in their careers. And some of us have moved on like this. Some of us have done this. Some of us have, stalled and stopped, and some of us have gotten stuck. And I believe that when you can bring women to a conversation and decision, it's going to be better and more robust. And so I just wanted to create a path for millions of women, millions of more women to get the careers that they need, they want, and they deserve.
Yeah, and what I think that is so incredibly relevant in any time, but I think now when we're at such crossroads with the impact that the pandemic has had, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. I feel like I imagine knowing how long it takes to write a book that you probably started it before all of that chaos
Yeah.
ensued. But it is probably, even more impactful and relevant today than even, when you first started thinking about it. So really
Yes,
great timing. And so the book is called Get Your Career in Shape, but I was, joking with you before, like shape is in all capital letters, and it's, sometimes we use it to like shout it off the rooftops. But actually, those are acronyms for
that's
different
right.
things that you cover in the book. Would you tell us a little bit more about what each one stands for, and why you found them important?
Yeah, so I did a study that has over 2,000 women in it, and I started it before the pandemic, and then I had to continue with more research to make sure I was capturing the full experience of women as we go through this pandemic. And what I did was I asked them a series of questions about their life, decisions around their career, their hopes, their dreams, things they could have done differently. And then I took all those data points and coded them to see what themes were emerging. And I also asked them additional questions about how they behave in work. And based on all of those data points, thousands and thousands of data points, I found 5 themes. And those 5 themes make up shape. And the first one is S, which stands for save. And what that really speaks to is having a strong financial foundation. I learned throughout my research that women who don't believe that they have a strong financial foundation won't take a risk. And that is because women in the United States are the primary breadwinners in their household. Over 50% of women are the primary breadwinners in their household. And if they are not the primary breadwinners, they are a significant contributor to the success of their household. And so, since so much depends on them, they don't want to take a risk if something were to happen, if they take this promotion or this new job and they lose that financial standing. So, the first one is about creating a strong financial foundation so that when an opportunity comes, you'll raise your hand because you won't have that at the back of your mind in terms of what you need to do for your family. The second one is around hard work. And it's not a mystery that if you want to be successful or achieve success, that you're going to work hard. No one's disputing that. I'm not disputing that. But what I learned in my research is that there was a disconnect with women in terms of the expectations around what hard work meant. So see if this sounds familiar. Maybe you've heard this before. You're talking to a friend. She's talked about how hard she's working, the hours she's putting in, the way she's raising her hand to take on more assignments. And when a promotion comes, it goes to someone else. Maybe someone who has less experience, maybe someone who is newer to the company. And she's scratching her head trying to figure out how that happened. And what I've come to appreciate and what I talk about in the book is that hard work is actually subjective. And the most important thing to do is to be aligned with the person who is evaluating your performance. Number 3, advocate for yourself. Women, for a lot of reasons, we will not speak up. Now, I'm not suggesting that you speak up just to be heard, but there's so many times when women can bring valuable perspective to a conversation and they won't, or they won't negotiate for the types of benefits or salaries or opportunities that they want. And by not learning these crucial negotiation skills and getting comfortable with it, we lose out on opportunity. In fact, I've seen studies that show from a financial perspective, over a lifetime, a woman could lose $1 million or more in wealth just because of pay disparity. So it's so important that women learn how to advocate for ourselves and practice that if it's something that's uncomfortable for you so that you find your voice. Number 4 in shape is P, persevere. I like to say, and you mentioned this earlier, Tanya, there are going to be highs in people's careers. Things are just going to go great. And then there are going to be moments, those low moments where things won't go well. And we have a choice to make when those things happen. And sometimes women, we choose to step away and we don't persevere and learn how to have people around us who can fortify us, support us, so that we can go through those lows where we get the best learning and skill building techniques so that we can move forward. The second part of persevering is also knowing when to leave. So we can be really committed and loyal as a gender, sometimes to our detriment. And so a good part of persevering is knowing how to ride the highs and the lows, but also knowing when to step away. And then finally, throughout my research, women said that oftentimes they don't feel prepared to take on a new opportunity because they don't have the educational or training background. So see if this sounds familiar to you. There's a male and a female, and they're looking at an opportunity. And the man looks at the opportunity, he goes, oh, great, I'm raising my hand, I'm going to apply for that job, whether or not he has any of the qualifications. Mm-hmm. Whereas a woman will look at that opportunity and say, oh, they're asking for 5 years. I only have 4 years and 360 days. I'm not going to apply. Or, I
think we're all very familiar with this scenario.
Right. And so what I propose is that we become and learn how to be lifelong learners and being open to educating ourselves and getting support systems so that we can take those on and recognize that if you are a lifelong learner, if there's some new requirement that you need, because you've changed your mindset, that you will learn, you'll feel more confident when an opportunity comes and maybe all the requirements aren't quite there, but you say, well, you know what? I'm a quick study, or I can learn, or I have a support system or whatever I need to get through it. So just because I only have 3 years and 360 days, I'm not going to let that hold me back. So that's shape.
Oh, thank you. And I'm looking and thinking through all my notes and everything that I took. And so thank you for giving us that overview. And now we'll deep dive into as many points as time allows.
Great.
One thing that I was thinking through. So I don't know. Am I midway through my career? I don't know. We'll see. Time will tell. But I'm certainly not just out of school, and I have some years under my belt. And so that's the hat that I had on as I was reading this book. So obviously, depending on maybe their age, maybe where they are in their career, different people who are reading your book will internalize things differently. Right. One thing that related to S, so kind of going almost through the different letters and chronological shape, that really jumped out at me as something that I know I can greatly improve is what you talked about. Self-efficacy is increased when you take control of your financial foundation. Now, because of my history, and for those of who know me, know that I was born and raised in former Yugoslavia. My family left because of the war, so I've been a huge saver. Like my entire life, I'm like, how much money do I have in my bank account? So that's a positive, right? However, the negative, or my big developmental opportunity, is that I've always been very diligent to see, a physician for my routine checkups every year, to go see a dentist, get my cleaning and all of that done. These, things that are good for your well-being. financial advisor? Like, no way. Like, I always considered it myself as like, well, do I have enough assets? Do I have enough money? If I just put money in the bank, is that okay? And then when I actually started to talk to people about it, they're like, get your money out of the bank. You're getting a 2% increase a year. I'm like, I know, but if I needed it, why would you need all that money? So for somebody that's been very diligent, usually about finances, or I thought so, that was really a huge opportunity. And you mentioned a few really, staggering stats about how many women actually are, financially responsible for their families. And a lot of times maybe people wouldn't think that because, we know the pay disparity that generally happens between men and women.
That's true.
And in your book, you also have have a quote here with a couple of stats. Today's women are experiencing unique challenges to attaining financial confidence, including fewer women with earning power. So in 2013, 60% of women had earning power. In 2019, this number had dropped to 38. So when we talk about the importance, like again, we mentally think maybe it's important to go to a health professional, but we're not seeking as much advice for our finances. Um, do you know what the barrier to that is? Like, is it just lack of awareness? Is it lack of like how for somebody that's thinking about this, like how can we almost make a ripple effect for women to feel like, yes, I'm in a position, or who do I go for? So maybe understanding the little bit around like why is this not happening more proactively, like how could we spread the knowledge to other women to engage in that more on more regular basis, or at least sometimes.
So the first thing I would say is, be okay with once you get the knowledge and then doing something doing something with that knowledge. I will tell you, early in my career, I was probably 23 years old, and I learned that the company that I had like a 401k type program. So I go into the HR office and I'm like, hi, I'm Candy Steele. I want to sign up for our program. And he says to me, oh, Candy, you're just 23. You're going to get married and a man's going to take care of you. You don't have to do anything about that. And plus we have this pension. Just spend your money. You don't even make that much anyway. And, and I'm just like, okay. And I walked away. And so that was my opportunity where I tried to do something and I was blocked. And lots of women are blocked. They're told these myths that someone else is going to take care of you, so you don't have to worry about that. Luckily for me, his assistant, who was getting ready to retire, overheard that conversation and came back to my cube later that day. And she goes, oh, he never does that to the men. And she gave me the paperwork so that I could start saving. And so some women get barriers to saving, whether it's, in my case, extreme at work by the HR person, or someone in your family, your life. They'll say you're just starting out, or you're going through a divorce, or maybe you need to wait because you're saving for other things. The first thing we could do is let women know that you deserve to have good financial literacy, and there are free ways that you can do it. And there are ways that will make a difference for you. The other thing is, personally, it can be overwhelming, because if you feel that you're in a good place, like for you, your life experience, Sonia, taught you that it was important to save. That was outstanding. But it never occurred to you maybe that there are professionals out there that maybe could help you learn more tools that are at your disposal. And so the best thing I can say is, if there's a woman in your life, have that conversation with her to say, how sure are you that your financial future is as secure as you can make it? And are there resources available to you, whether free or otherwise, that you can at least have a conversation, take an online quiz, do something to make sure you're set up well for now and in the future. And if you work for an employer that offers these, set up an appointment so that you could do it. So the very first thing I would say is, let women know we deserve these things and encourage them to pursue them, because it's good for them, their families, and their futures.
I actually have an interesting comment or thought just listening to you, which is that for me personally, so I'm the opposite of Sonia. I'm like, you can't take it with you. So I never have any money. It's horrible. However,
that was me in my 20s.
Yeah. What I realized is that I actually know I have good financial literacy when it comes to my business as an entrepreneur. And just even in work before I had my own business, I knew how to do a budget, for my department or whatever, but it never clicked that I should be doing that kind of thing for myself at home, and I mean, I know a budget is a really obvious thing that most people should have, and I do now, but like they're so completely separate. Like, this is a good example of the work and life, like in our minds it's completely separate, but in actual fact we need to apply like skills in both directions, right?
Absolutely. And I get it. There's so much in your day, right? There's just so much in your day in your life that you have going on. And if you're feeling pretty much comfortable, it's easy not to look at foundational things. And this research is all about what are those foundational things that women should be paying attention to set us up well for success.
Yeah. And so based on our conversation, to me, what's kind of coming to mind, a big part is like even just awareness and what you're doing now, talking about it. Because then depending on where somebody is in their career, they say, well, wait a minute, if I'm hearing about this on repeated basis, probably means I should spend a little more time thinking about it. And again, I think it's just because maybe it's not, when women get together, it's not often a topic of conversation. Like I know a lot of times we'll talk about like depending on, like what diapers are you using and does your kid have a rash and do I put it like different things that are also very important. But I think this is, and maybe it's because sometimes like money is still kind of thought about as taboo, and so like don't want to tell, but like if I mention this, do people like, are they going to think I make a certain amount of money? But I think going back to what you're saying, just the foundational, like it impacts so many parts of our life, but it impacts our confidence and it impacts our ability to raise our hand and say, I'm willing to take a chance on this. And I also think, to some of your earlier points, a lot of times for women to go up for a position or raise their hand, objectively, it's lost less of a chance than what they think it is.
Right.
But because they're not used to it, their nervousness is there. And I know in your book, you talk a lot about, taking some risks in almost like less, it wasn't like less stakes, when there are fewer stakes in place, to get yourself trained on it
Right.
and to get
Exactly.
yourself to know like, wow, I succeeded at this and I didn't think I would, or you know what, I didn't, but I'm still okay. I'm glad I raised my hand. I learned a lot from it. And that actually brings me to another point that I read that, really resonated, is the what you were talking about, working smarter, not necessarily harder. And I had huge luck, I think, at the beginning of my career, that one of my first leaders really instilled that in me. And I think she saw at that time I was a young PhD. And in my mind, it was literally like, put your head down and just work, 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 and good things will come to you. And I didn't, like, I was a researcher. Like, you get your PhD and you basically get a list of things for how you succeed. You do this, you do this, you do this research, these are the steps. And if you work hard and you follow that formula, eventually, more than likely, you'll get your PhD. And then you go out in this world and there's networking and there's like, it's anything but like a straight path. And like, what do you do? And so she was really good at, not only being my leader, but also my coach, and taking me and saying, okay, this is where you need to be diligent, but here are some of the things that you might not be used to doing that are going to be really, really important for your career, for what I understand it is that you want to do. And that, that circles back to your conversation with really being clear with your leader what your aspirations are, because if you're not, they probably won't guess, not because they don't want to, but it's really not their job. Like, their job is to support you and grow you. But that two-way dialogue makes it a lot more effective in getting the support and the coaching that you need. And so what would be some advice that you would have for people, particularly women, that maybe like need to take a step back and say, am I working hard or smart or both? Or like, what am I doing here? Like, what are some of the things maybe they could ask themselves to make sure that they're taking those right steps to achieve what they want to achieve in their career?
Right. So the first question is a simple one, but can be really difficult for a lot of women. Am I and my boss on the same page about my work? Have I sat down with my boss on a regular basis and asked the questions, how am I doing? Is there anything I should is there anything I should stop doing? Is there anything I should stop doing? How do you view the quality of my work? And then maybe walk them through a few of the things that you're working on to say, do you have any suggestions of how this could be stronger or better? So that's the one thing, that alignment. And I'll give you a couple of examples. There is a woman who I used to work with, and she wanted to impress her boss. And so the requirement was a 2-page executive summary. That was all that was needed. But she would spend hours and hours of putting these 30-page documents together, one that no one had time to read and no one would be reading. And it was a total waste of her time. And so she wasn't working smart. And so it's really important that you ask yourself, am I working on the right things? Like, am I meeting the requirement? And before I go and do all this extra work, when do I have the time to do it? Is it happening at the expense of something else? And is it going to be appreciated and needed? And if it's not, then I think it's important for us to step back and not look at our pride and ego and just do that one thing really, really well, and then go do something different. And then the other thing is just being really honest with yourself about how you're delivering. And the reason why I say that is, we like to be supportive of ourselves, right? And think that we're doing really, really great work. But if we don't ever ask, how do you really know? And so one of the best ways is, you know what you're doing, but to take that step. So if it's not your manager, maybe it's a peer or a mentor or a coach, just to make sure that you are level set. And then the last thing I'll say is, if you are burnt out on something, do you have the right resources to make yourself successful? And can you raise your hand to ask for more resources? So we like to be the hero, right? We're going to stay up all night and work all weekend and do it. That's not necessarily working smart. If the requirements of the role dictate that there needs to be resources, at the very least, you should ask for them with a compelling argument to get them, as opposed to just taking it for the team. Because here's the deal. If you do that and you do it repeatedly, they will allow you to keep doing it. And then you'll find yourself weeks and months later, wiped out, exhausted. And because if women, we don't complain, no one knows there's a problem. And so working smart is also being honest about, can you really do this? And do you have the resources available so that you can do it well, and have you asked? Mm-hmm. Now, if they say no, that's a different topic, and that's persevere. But for this, it's really about being honest with yourself and not necessarily having that shero syndrome where you can just, work yourself into the ground if resources are available, or even worse, resources are available and you say no. That happens a lot with women.
I know.
Oh, I'm fine.
I can still do it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I have this mountain on my back. Go ahead and put a Mack truck on it. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. I'm happy to do. I'm a team player. Get the help if it's offered. Say yes.
Yeah. No, I think that's really great advice. And in my mind, it's almost like the next step of like knowing when to say no to something. So like there was, glorified of like, yes, I can do everything, but that doesn't necessarily make you more effective. And more often than not, it can distract you from things that can be really impactful and they can really get you noticed. But I think still in many cases that overwork can be glorified. And I'm very hopeful that that's on the way out with, Arianna Huffington some years ago being very vocal about the need for sleep and about how many more conversations we're having today about burnout. Unfortunately, I don't think it's still normalized everywhere. I think there's still work to do. But I'm hopeful that people as they're more exposed to that information, they're realizing that approach that maybe was, popular 10 years ago, that we're becoming more human and that we're understanding that people need different things and that, this isn't the be all and end all. I'm looking at all the questions. Sorry.
I want to add one more tip that a male shared with me recently. We were talking about my book, and he goes, I just never really had that problem. And I'm like, really? How did you manage that? He goes, oh, I have this go-to phrase. I'm like, do share. He goes, just don't have the bandwidth. Love to do it, just don't have the bandwidth. That's what men say. Love to do it, just don't have the bandwidth. And then they leave it at that. And then
and that's it. That's like, okay, well, you don't. Like,
everybody write that down.
Love to do it, just don't have the bandwidth.
bandwidth.
just right now, check back again, maybe in a month, maybe there'll be more bandwidth. But I think that is so important, and it's understanding of that capacity, and for us to have the confidence, I guess, maybe the be able to introspect and understand what is the bandwidth that I have, and then two, what it is that I have, how do I spend it? And for me, I always talk about how my personal tipping points. I was very much, one of those people early in my career that worked in the evening, stayed at the office late, very often worked on the week. Yeah, like right, like a lot of us have been there, so we can speak from experience. Yes. And for me, in some ways, the tipping point was it was a little bit before I had my son, but I said, I think it was when I moved to Argentina, and I said I made a very personal decision for what I wanted in my life. And if I let my professional life overtake that, what's the point of, taking that leap of faith on my personal end? And then when my son was born, it became much easier for me to say, hey, it's 6 o'clock, our nanny's leaving, and I'm gonna go spend time with Mateo. Like, I had him for a reason. But the thing is that I'm hopeful is for people who are on my team, for people who talk with me, who know me, not to take that as like, oh, okay, well, I guess I have to wait to have a kid to do that. It's like, no, no, no. For me, that was the tipping point. And I think it was also at the time that we started to talk more about burnout, and we started to talk more about different priorities. But like, I would never expect, like, oh, you don't have a kid, so you can work at night. Like, no, like, there are a million things in life you can do other than taking care of a child. Go live it up, do it all. And if one day, if you have a kid, hurry and do it more now. But one day, if you don't have a kid, it's still okay. Like, it's your life, and do what you want. And it's not
Absolutely.
like, sometimes people are really passionate about their job and they want to put in extra work, and that's okay. If that's the right decision for them. But I think
Right.
each one of us needs to have the right decision. And one more thing I wanted to touch on, with the time we have, is you talk about advocating for yourself. And wow, do I feel like that's really important. And I actually did my dissertation on impression management and the way women present themselves in the workplace. So that's very near and dear to my heart. One of the things, and I don't expect you to really have an answer here because I know it's very new, but even maybe just, your opinion, is I've been reading more and more about what's going to happen in the hybrid workplace. And that, we're seeing some statistics that women are the ones more likely to opt out to work remotely, and that women are the ones who are maybe going to do hybrid. And now, if we know that before the pandemic, women had a greater challenge of advocating for themselves, what happens now? Like, how do women actively and effectively do that when maybe their face is not always going to be visible around the office, but their impact will be the same or maybe greater than what it was before?
So the first thing that I've seen in my research over the past year and a half through the pandemic, really focusing on how work is changing and what women want. And I often ask a series of questions, and I'll ask women to rank them or show their preference. And what I've come to appreciate is women like the option for remote work. Most people do, but what they prefer is flexibility. They'll trade off remote work for flexibility. And what I believe will need to happen is we just need to be more intentional about advocating for ourselves. So in the past, maybe walk into your manager's office. Now you're scheduling some time for a Zoom call, but the conversation still needs to take place, right? So all the steps in terms of being aligned, articulating what you want, sharing your point of view, disagreeing if you do not agree, and doing it in the best way possible, those things still happen. So what women need to do is just really make sure they are intentional. If you're on a call, keep your camera on to be visible, still communicate. If it's a type of call where it's a lot of people and it doesn't make sense to keep the camera on, make sure you're showing up in the chat, after the fact, using the tools and resources that are available, raising your hand to lead the team so that you have the visibility. But really, your best champion is going to be your manager. And so I feel that women just need to continue to have the intentionality, but use the technology, just make sure that they're present and that they're showing up. And then the other thing is to be honest about what they're going through. I believe that we need more grace given everything that we've learned, these past over 2 years. And we also need to be able to have more empathy. And, it's not unreasonable, given everything that we've gone through, to be able to have a conversation with your manager and your team to say, listen, here is what I'm going through, and this is the support that I need, and to ask for it. And hopefully you're in an environment where you can do your best work in your team, and your manager is going to support you. And we just don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we're optimistic. Maybe in some communities the mask can come off because the vaccination rates are high, and the infection rates are low, and people are practicing good hygiene, or whatever the case may be. But there are going to be moments when we get to go back in, and times we can. And if you have people in your home that you have to care for, and you have to step back, and things change, those are the moments of grace. And so what I would say is, if you need that grace and empathy, be comfortable about asking for it. I think that we sometimes suffer in silence. And the other thing I will say is, I enjoyed all that extra work I was doing when I was coming through my career. I had fascinating work. I liked my team. I didn't have a family, so my work blended, and it was great. But also, if I'm honest, I think I had a certain amount of fear that I could not say no, because I was really afraid that if I said no, somehow it would adversely impact me. And it was really in my 30s when my mentor said, why don't you just say no to that? Sounds like you got a lot on your plate. I'm like, I could never say no, because this is going to happen, like a long list, and my bonus will be low. Like, they'll see I'm not here. And a lot of women aren't coached to say no. And I think that's also a big part of it. And so I would just say that women need to have a lot of intentionality, really try to push to get the flexibility that you need to make your work and life work and still meet the demands of your organization, and to give the grace, ask for the grace, and bring empathy to the dialogue. And if you're managing women, you work with women are in your life, people identify as female in your life, or women in your life, give the grace and the empathy, because at the end of the day, we're human. And that dynamic, even though we're going to produce and deliver for our organizations, there are people, humans, who are at the end of that. And we need that grace and empathy, and now more than ever. And if you do that, you can retain your talent. So you're not paying that 30% of whatever that salary is to try to attract someone new. You have more productive workforce. We learned through the pandemic that productivity at home is not an issue for most businesses. And so now we have to think about the issues of wellness and mental health, and making sure that you have someone who has taken care of herself so that she can do what she needs to do for you and her team.
I love it. And actually, so believe it or not, we're totally at time, which always happens just when we're getting really into it. And I think what you just said is like a perfect way to close out our conversation. I would just sort of ping off of that and just say there is a window of opportunity right now that people understand, organizations understand how important empathy is. So if you're, like Candace was saying, if you're in a position to be able to ask for help or say no to something, like, now's the time to try it out, right? Sonia, do you have anything else you want to say before we hit our little...
I have more questions, but I won't do it. We'll leave those for offline. But no, just Candace, thank you. Thank you so much again for this incredible book. Again, it's called Get Your Career in Shape. For somebody who maybe didn't write it down at the beginning of the podcast, I think it's brilliant. I think it's full of really great advice. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for all the additional insights that you shared with us. I think anyone who reads this book will certainly get many insights from it. So I'm very hopeful, again, that for those of our listeners who haven't had a chance to read it yet, but are, intrigued and impressed by some of the things that we talked about today, that they'll pick it up. So incredibly grateful for your time and for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody. Oh, do the little dance at the end.
We caught Maddie doing her dance.
Awesome. That was great.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And Guy, if you want to come back, you can join his girlfriend. I don't know where she's. There she
Thank
is. There
you.
she is.
Thank
Uh,
you.
no, I mean this should have been like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. Like I was looking through and I'm like, we can ask people, about like you were mentioning like what would be the practical advice. The one thing I do want to mention, because again, as a reminder for everybody who's watching us live, is you do get a free copy of Dr. Candace's book if you joined us here for X Day. And in there, Candace, you talk about like each chapter has like a red, yellow, and green section. And what do those mean? How can somebody really like I love
Yeah.
it because it's also like it's practical chapters, but then it's like this really like introspective way to end. So if you can tell us a little bit about more about that, that would be
Yeah.
fantastic.
So I wanted to write the book for where women were in their life, their career, and their life stage. And it could be really overwhelming. Like we had two great examples from Maddie and Sonia, like where you are and what you're focusing on. And so at the end of the book, I have these red, yellow, and green career zones with about 10 questions that you can ask yourself to see how you can move along a trajectory to get to where you need to be. And so there's simple questions like I don't know what financial literacy is. I am saving a certain amount. I've saved more than this amount. And so you can just kind of follow that to get a sense of where you are in a way that's comfortable for you so that you get a good sense of where you want to start. But more importantly, what do you do next?
Yeah, and I love that. And I know when we spoke before, you were mentioning that a lot of times, like, it can be fluid too, and that it's not
Yes,
necessarily about, being in the green for all of it, but understand what is your priority. That sometimes you can be in the green and you can go back.
absolutely.
But I think it's like it really gave like very concrete examples around like, okay, how am I doing in this area? And then
Right.
of course, like anything in life, and I didn't even have a chance to ask you about like you talked about the myth of having it all, and I was just recently at a conference and there's so much talk about
Oh
well-being,
my
and for people to like not walk away thinking I've got to be perfect at everything, because there's a whole other set of books about like not striving for perfection and why it's mentally important not to do that. So I think that this outlines really well like where you
God.
can be and the path.
There's so much pressure on women. I'm a Generation X. Yay, Generation X. We never get
Yay.
enough attention. I always say we're like the Jan Brady of the generation conversation, with Marsha being the Gen X, the millennials and the baby boomers, and now the Gen Z. But um, there was this commercial when I was growing up, and it was this woman holding a baby, and she was like, I could bring home the bacon fried up in the pan and never ever let you forget you're a man like Anjali. And it was basically this assertion that women can and should do it all. And actually, there are trade-offs to those decisions. You can, but at what cost? And so what I really wanted to encourage women to do is be intentional about the choices that you make and the trade-offs, and making sure you're having the crucial conversation so that you get support. And at any decision that you make, it's okay. If you decide that you want to lean completely into your career to the expense of everything else and you have that conversation, great. If you want to step back from your career and raise your family and then reemerge sometime later, great. If you want to say, you know what, I've been doing this, now I want to be an entrepreneur, great. Just know that, having it all is a myth and it's hard. And I think it's unfair and unreasonable that women have that cast on us, because it sets us up for failure.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And I hope everybody listening like really internalizes it. I think women for themselves, I think men for like I constantly have that discussion with my partner, and I think like he's like the most even keel probably person that I've ever met. Which I'm like, how do I become more like you? But I also like I share things with him around the pressures that I feel, and I try to be very transparent about that so he knows what I'm going through, and then we work on negotiating like how can he support me, how can he maybe talk me out of like, Sonia, you don't like, it's okay, like this doesn't have to be at this level, like maybe we avoid the word perfect. I'm like, well, that's not okay, well, it's one step down, it doesn't have to be one step down either. But a lot of times I think if you have a good network of friends, a good partner, like people that can really support you, you can have those discussions,
Right.
and realize like how do you really effectively negotiate that. And it's, at least in my experience, it's something that's definitely ongoing. It's not something where like you make peace with something or you're okay where you are and like that's it. It's a work in progress. Like for me, one day
Yes.
I'm okay, the next day I'm like, wait a minute. Like, no,
Or
Sonia.
or that we can actually change our minds. Just because on Monday, this is important to us, a year from now on Monday, it may be different. We can change our mind. There's so much pressure on women. Like, how many times have you said, well, where did that come from? How do you know you can do that? Like, we're not given permission to focus on what we want or deserve. It's only like, we can only carve out our needs. And I hope that one of my messages that women get is I get to choose. I get to choose how I manage my career. And I don't have to be shamed for choosing a career or choosing home or hybrid. It's my choice. I'm setting myself up for success based on how success looks for me in my circumstance.
Absolutely.
And if I change my mind, that's okay too.
The women's prerogative to change her mind.
Yeah, everybody's, women's, men's, whatever, in between, all of it. All
Absolutely.
of it. We grow and evolve. That's the beauty of life.
Yes.
Like, we always say the same, like, what's the point? Well, thank you. It's just been like such a pleasure to talk with you today. I'm so excited for everybody that's going to get to read your book and listen to your insights here. Thank you again for spending time with us. Thank you for bringing all this knowledge and this book into the world. And I'll certainly be in touch with you soon. I'm sure we'll pop in the comments. I don't know, what's the best place if somebody wanted to connect with you, maybe have another conversation?
Oh, absolutely. So you can follow me on LinkedIn at CandaceStillFlippin.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Dr.Candace Official. You can go to my website, CandaceStillFlippin.com, or, if they circle back with you, Sonia, you'll put me in contact.
I absolutely will.
Really
absolutely
excited
will.
to stay in touch.
A million thanks again, Dr. Candace. Maddie, thank you for another amazing podcast episode. Guille, thank you for all the magic, always. It was amazing to see your face today, in addition to all your brilliance behind the scenes. And ladies, a huge hug and have a wonderful rest of the day. And we'll see you all soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Take care.